Hey, quick one before we dive in. If you're running a social team, you need to look at Slate. Video and image editing, long to short form clipping, team approvals, and all of your brand guidelines baked in one place to create content, no chaos. It was built by the guy who ran social for the NFL, so he actually knows what your team is dealing with. Go to slateteams.com to learn more.
Welcome to the Marketing Millennials, the No BS Marketing Podcast. I'm Daniel Murray, and join me for unfiltered conversations with the brains behind marketing's coolest companies. The one request I tell our guests, stories or it didn't happen. Get ready to turn the up.
We are back with another episode of the Marketing Millennials. I have Sam on the podcast. Sam has been running social for some cool companies for a long time, which is pretty cool. Her most recent was Frida, and where she crushed it. And we'll talk a little bit about that too. And I know you also were at Nara Organics recently, and now you are doing your own thing, which is fun. So excited to chat. I want to go into, how did you get into marketing? How did you get into social?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you for having me. Really excited to chat today. So I am a marketer through and through. So I spent the first 12 years of my career at Saucony, which is a global running and lifestyle brand based up in Boston, which is home for me. And that's really where I sort of like dipped my toe into every part of marketing except for digital and social. So it was everything from field marketing, retail, brand marketing. And I kind of learned that one of the things that's most important to me as a marketer is to have a product that I really believe in. And I was obsessed with the shoes and apparel, the gear that we made there. And from that experience, I realized like it's really hard for me to get excited about a brand and about storytelling if there isn't a product at the core of everything that I really believe and love. And so I spent a good chunk of my career there, and then I moved over to parenting brand Frida, and that sort of coincided with me becoming a mom. So it really spoke to who I was at the time. And in the same sense, an incredible product company that, you know, built an incredible brand and really meaningful platform for parents. And that is sort of where I went from being a marketing generalist to really being a social specialist in particular and a content creator. And then from there, hopped over to Nara, so kind of stayed in the parenting space for my next move. And then a couple months ago, I decided to, do my own thing. And so now I'm consulting with brands and also sort of carving my own little corner of the internet where on my Instagram and TikTok accounts, I sort of dig into all the best and smartest brand and marketing campaigns, stunts, social plays. And that's been really fun because I think I have this running theory now that marketing is a spectator sport. And social media has made it that way. People love to, pick apart and dig into the things that they see brands doing online. And so it's just really fun to be a voice in that conversation and sort of create space for people to talk about and analyze those things.
I love that marketing is a spectator sport. I feel that so much creating marketing content because I always think, what are the spectators going to see if I put out this piece of content, if I launch this campaign or if I do something? So I always think about that. I'm like, I know I'm going to get a bunch of people flooding in if I do something wrong or do something right or don't do something, or that's a great way to put it. I want to also go, what is like a marketing moment from like the last 60 days that actually made you stop scrolling? And you like to yourself, okay, this brand has actually figured something out.
There's so much. And I think part of it has to do with the fact that we are, today, the World Cup literally kicks off today. And so the last, 30 days really has been just one beat after another from some of the biggest brands in the world showing us what they have to say. And so it's been really neat. I've been paying super close attention to Adidas and Nike in particular. I think both of them, at the surface level, did something similar. Like they both had these really incredible 5-minute videos or films, which Adidas sort of took more of a cinematic approach. Nike, I feel like, showed up with like a Marvel Universe type of situation with just an incredibly broad mix of athletes, celebrities. And so they both had these singular touch points that were really incredible and very fun to sort of look at and compare. But I think the thing that's most interesting to me right now is Nike's tactical approach, because it actually isn't about that hero film. It's about all of the content extensions that they've built around it. And last week, we really started to see what that looks like and sort of see these sort of like secondary beats to the story on each of their athlete and celebrities' accounts. So they're really sort of building this incredibly smart, interconnected web of content that leverages not just their brand platforms, but all of their athletes and celebrities. So I just think that's really interesting. And that's something that when I think of marketing, it is so hard to have a singular beat because the social cycle moves so quickly, the news cycle moves so quickly. But I'm really curious to see if they're able to sustain the pace and the level of interest that they've had over the past couple of weeks throughout the games. And if they can, I just think that will be an incredible case study for a lot of brands going forward.
Yeah. When you're talking to brands or when you've like launched your own campaign, how do you think about creating beats for the brand? Like, because I think a lot of brands I see focus on like that one, like, let me try to get a fireworks show. I'm not going to do any beats leading up to this. I'm just going to try for the fireworks show. And if it doesn't succeed, it's all or nothing. So if you were like telling someone to do a social strategy, like what should people think about when they creating those beats?
I think the smartest place to start is with social listening. And I think, again, touching back to what's so neat with Nike's campaign here is that a lot of the storylines that they've built they didn't come up with them in a vacuum. They stem from interesting cultural moments or sports moments related to these athletes. And so they're using things that they know already strike a chord with people emotionally. They're touching back to it. So it sort of has that, it's like a wink to the consumer, like, hey, we're fans as much as you are in this. We know all of these moments, and they're using that as the fuel for a really creative, fun, high energy moment in our current world. The internet, there's a track record for you to work off of. And if something struck a chord or went viral once before, it will go viral or strike a chord again. And I think like that's sort of a principle that I've had as a content creator is, you don't just go viral and move on to the next thing. You figure out how can I remix or, recycle this into a new idea or a new concept. So I think that's sort of the space. I really love looking at, if we had a celebrity or an athlete, I would go back into the archives and figure out what are all the interesting things that happened, and is there anything that feels relevant or that we can connect here again? So you're not starting from scratch, and it's sort of, it has that element of like a wink, to the audience, like, hey, we know this backstory, we know the lore, and we're sort of continuing it or building on it as opposed to just throwing something new at you.
I don't get why so many people don't repeat their winners. It just blows my mind. Like, until that idea dies, you should just keep beating that idea till it stops. And then the other thing I wanted to say is, like, when you're social listening for a brand, are you like, how wide are you going? Because obviously there's like culture moments, and the best ideas come from all over. They don't just come from. So how wide are you going? Because some people just like listen to their narrow space at the end, but you could take something from an industry that is so has nothing to do with your aspect, take the idea, remix it for your industry, and it's a whole new idea that will probably have some sort of steam behind it because you knew it went viral for that other brand. So how wide does that go, the social listening?
I think it depends. And I think one of the benefits, of being on a team or a part of a team is that everybody has sort of their own algorithm and their own cultural connections and things that they find interesting. So I do think the smartest thing you can do is surround yourself with people who aren't in your exact algorithm and have different interests, because I think that's, a smart place for a brand. One of my favorite phrases is like, bad artists copy, good artists steal. So it's like looking outside of your direct industry and outside of your competitors, like forget your competitors, look at just brands that you admire or you're interested in and see what they're doing. And is there a way you can sort of adapt, maybe something they did tactically with a celebrity or somebody you're partnering with who has this interesting backstory. So I think it's like, this is where I just always find the Gen Z intern or like the social media intern steering the ship. It's like they're an important part of things, but so are people who have had experience and exposure over 10 or 15 years. And sort of the magic, I think, happens when you have people who are tapped in from different ends of the spectrum, age-wise, culture-wise. So I think that's probably one of the most important things. And then the other piece, just your question of like, how broad do you go? I think one of the most interesting uses of AI right now for marketers is in AI social listening, and the ability to not have to be fully dialed into all of these, disparate topics or different areas of the internet, and really using that as a cheat code to figure out, what is interesting, or not even just to figure out, but also to validate a hunch you might have. And that's something that before it would be a lot harder to do, and it would be way more of a manual process, and you'd probably, go blind scrolling, trying to validate the things that you might think, are effective or think could be interesting for a campaign. And so I just think with social listening in particular, AI, like I'm not going to use AI to make my content, but for research purposes, absolutely. I think that's like a place that will only get smarter and better.
I want to also go into some things you did at Frida. I think I want you to like walk me through the moment where you decided like, hey, we need to go this like unconventional route in the space. That nobody's doing it. It could have been a risk, but it turned out it panned off. Walk me through how that decision was made and how like you had conversations internally saying, like, hey, I think this will work. I think we should start doing different content for the brand.
Yeah. So when this was about like 2.5 years ago, and I'd been at the brand for about 8 months or so. And our president was like, hey, we really need to figure out TikTok and short form video. At the time, the only videos we were posting were UGC. It was just UGC either found or things that we had briefed creators, but it was just a very, traditional way that we were operating. And so we really wanted to crack that code. So we actually brought on a consultant, Ashwin Krishnaswamy, who is still a close friend and mentor, but we brought him on board, and it really took sort of a sort of task force team to decide if we want to do something that's going to actually break through, we're going to need to break some of the brand guidelines and some of the things that we have sort of held really dear and close to our marketing approach. And so right from the start, we kind of decided, we have these products that are incredibly well loved, but also really easy to demonstrate and show on camera. And so we decided, we were going to try and see how product demo-based content would function and how it would do. And because some of these products are so unexpected, the nose Frida, the snot sucker is one of them, but it's literally a tube you put up to your baby's nostril, and there's a straw attached, and the parent sucks to get the snot out of their baby's nose. There are these products that they're so weird and like almost so unbelievable that they have that stopping power. And they serve as their own visual hook, which is so powerful and important for social content. So we knew we had those. And then I think the real breakthrough for me came, after the first video we posted did go viral. Immediately it became a process of using data to validate the swings we were taking. And so we had like 2 or 3 different formats we tried right out of the gate. We almost immediately saw that product demos were working really well. So we're going to go all in on those. And we're really going to, we're going to test and try and see which products are just as viral as the nose Frida and kind of go from there. And so that was really interesting to me as a marketer, because up to that point, a lot of the work I had done was more on, the brand marketing side or product marketing. I wasn't close to data in that way, and I wasn't able to see the immediate results of my efforts and be like, okay, the numbers are here. That validates this, shot that we took. So we're going to go again and again and again. So I think that was just a very pivotal moment for me as, a content creator and as a marketer, as I was able to say, I know how to talk about these products. I know how to position them. I know what pain points they solve for parents. And then I'm going to take the data of what's working and use that to sort of snowball. And it very much did. So I'd say that was one piece of it. And then I think the other was, the thing that makes Frida so distinct in the parenting category is that it's a brand that has never been afraid to have, the honest conversation and sort of go where other brands don't. And, 10 years ago or so, actually even more, I think like 11 or 12, when Chelsea Hirschhorn founded the brand, it was like, sort of like peak millennial Instagram, where everything you were seeing online as a parent was sort of like, it was Instagram perfect. And it was like this very idealized image of parenting, very sterilized and sweet, and didn't really speak to the realities of parenting when you're up with a baby at 2 a.m. and they're screaming and crying and they can't breathe because their nose is stuffed. So because of the sort of ethos that Frida had to be a brand that not only solved those problems, but helped parents really feel seen through those experiences, I think that gave us the sort of the permission to be more distinct on social compared to a lot of other parenting brands. And so I think that was it was sort of a perfect storm of, the brand positioning and the products and sort of, it all created just a perfect storm for us to really fly.
And I will say the snot sucker works really well.
Yes.
I also want to go into what you're seeing specifically, like what is working on platform, like short form video platforms right now. Like, could you describe what the difference between what's working on TikTok versus what's working on IG, what's working on YouTube Shorts, and how a brand should think about each platform as a different entity?
Yeah, I think that the things that work, they vary. And the sort of biggest challenge or misconception, I think, is that what works for one brand and what works for one creator will work for everybody. And there really is no, universal advice you can give that anything will work. And that's my big pet peeve whenever you see sort of these social media growth hackers and stuff, or 3 tips to grow your brand online. And it's you really don't know what will work until you sort of assess what the goals are for social for the brand, which platforms make sense based on the consumers you're trying to reach. But I will say, I think the biggest opportunity right now is brands are able to diversify their accounts and sort of create specific goal-oriented accounts based on what they need to market or how they need to reach people and the stories they need to tell. And I think the biggest missed opportunity is everybody is always very focused on being entertaining, being funny, being unhinged, creating content that's going to make it to the group chat and into the DMs. But the thing that I hear people talk far less about, which was actually one of the biggest growth hacks for us at Frida, was understanding that social media and Instagram and TikTok in particular are search engines. And so many brands that have products that have high search value, especially products that solve problems, there is an entire world of content you could be making that is very specifically engineered to surface when somebody is looking for a solution. And so, at Frida, what that looked like was creating content that literally was built off of the things I knew parents were searching for. So it was how to clear my baby's stuffy nose, how to sleep train my baby. Actually, one of the best anecdotes I have for this, or the best proof points, is I think 5 or 6 months in to us creating content, daylight saving time was coming up. And I knew as a parent, one of the biggest things that you would see the week or two before daylight saving time is all the sleep training accounts would start posting tips for how to help your kid adjust to the new time change. And so I was all right, I know that that's coming. So then same way that you can do predictive SEO and sort of seed content on your website or wherever, I was I'm actually going to see if I can create content that will surface when somebody searches for video tips about this. And so I created a video, and it was literally, I think the hook was, parents, if you value your sleep, this is about to be the hardest week for you, but here's what you can do instead. And I posted it the Monday before the time change. The time change was a Sunday. So I posted it on Monday, and it didn't do anything crazy. It kind of, I think, had like 40 or 50,000 views or so. But once we got into that Wednesday, Thursday time period, there was a little spike in the views and engagement. People started sharing and saving the video. But the coolest proof point was that then NBC or GMA, I forget exactly who it was, Good Morning America, I think, was doing a story on daylight saving time. And they reached out, they'd seen the video and they reached out and were like, hey, can we use this on the show? And they ended up using my hook as the hook for their segment. So it was like understanding that not just people, but reporters, editors, producers, they're looking for content. Consumers are looking for content. There are so many interesting cultural moments or sporting moments, all sorts of things that are happening in the calendar that you can sort of reverse engineer your content plans to address so that when people come searching, your brand is there. And, that was sort of like a fun example, but there are so many others. And so I just think one of the things, say, for example, if you were like Apple, you could have a dedicated account, and I don't know, maybe they do have this, but you could have a dedicated account that is just iPhone hacks. And it's just a consistent feed of like every different hack you can think of for your phone, how to use your phone, how to take better pictures. And we all know that algorithms favor consistency and audiences favor consistency in the kind of content. So instead of trying to like maybe throw a hack or a tip into the general Apple account once every 2 weeks, you have one place for that, one dedicated account. So I think that's sort of the new world of social, is deciding, what sort of areas can you go deep into, and maybe deciding, is that its own account as opposed to it living and fighting for air on your brand account, which is maybe where you want to be more editorial and sort of share more of like your brand storytelling perspective. So I think that's just like an interesting opportunity.
Yeah, I think the search engine one is super interesting, and I think super valuable because, like you said, there's like those moments that happen in your brand, those tentpole moments, but there's also like evergreen moments that, like, for example, parents, like they're probably searching, my child got sick for the first time, or like milestones that there, or all parents are searching like weeks 4 through 8, or my child's going to hit, what happens when my child's not sleeping at 10. And if you capitalize on that and the search bar, because even me, when I'm looking for a restaurant, I'll go to TikTok or IG and say like, what are the best restaurants in that area before I go to the area. And I get videos of people who have 500 likes on them, not like viral videos, but they were very valuable to me because I'm going to that area, I'm looking. So even though that video didn't go viral, it's a valuable resource that now I might go follow that creator or that brand who gave me those tips because I found them valuable, or I went to the restaurant and it was good, or I will share it to my friends in a group chat because we're going on vacation there. So I think that's super good way to think about that. Sometimes it's not, the goal isn't like that engagement. Your goal could be that you're trying to get searched and you're trying to pop up when at a moment your audience needs something and you are fulfilling that need, because they're not going to need everything at every moment, and you want to be there when you fulfill that need of those people. Because I'm guaranteed the views are people in market for that content at that time. And then there's like those people who aren't in market at that time, but they could be in market in 2 months, and you are in that search engine when you pop up. So I think that's super interesting take that I don't hear many people say with social.
Mm-hmm.
We're brought to you by Slate today. And honestly, if you run social for a brand, listen in for like 20 seconds. How many tools are you using just to make content? Because most teams are at 5 or 6 apps. And you're still chasing logos in some Google Drive folder nobody's organized since 2022. Slate is one content creation workspace. The NFL, Amazon, New York Times are on it. The Pistons literally ditched CapCut for Slate. Video and image editing, AI clipping, approvals, brand assets, all of it.
slateteams.com, links in the show notes. Back to the episode. I also want to go into we talk about social listening a little bit, but I want to know about how do you spot as a brand, how are you supposed to spot a trend and know in your head or in this trend or this moment or this is something we should be a part of, or we should just sit this one out? Because you've seen they play the game and it goes badly, or they play the game and it goes very good. So how do you know, as a brand, I need to hop on this moment in time?
The best way that I've seen a brand sort of operationalize their approach to trend-based content and sort of culturally relevant content is, I actually saw IKEA, one of their heads of marketing recently posted that they've built structure and guidelines that help them decide when and how they're going to insert themselves into moments like this. So I think that's the most important thing is understanding that it shouldn't just be let's do it. I think everybody should pause and sort of try to, put down on paper, here's when and why we will insert ourselves. And here are also some parameters. If we can't think of a great idea in the first 15 minutes, 20 minutes of brainstorming, maybe it's not worth our time. Because I do think, if you're not a brand who lives and breathes internet culture and you don't speak that language and it's not easy for you, say it's a trending meme, if it's not easy for you to dig right in and riff and produce something quickly, it's probably going to be more of a distraction than it is a benefit. And I think that going back to the thing we were talking about not long ago about remixing your content, the biggest pitfall with reliance on trends is that trends are not evergreen. You cannot say you go viral with that, I can't even think of a recent trend that happened or a meme that went viral recently, but say you generate 500,000 views on a Taylor Swift moment, that moment is gone the next week. You can't remix that. You can't go back to that. So you're sort of looking for, okay, if I'm going to get those numbers again, I need another trend and another trend. And it's you're investing and sort of dependent and reliant on these moments coming to you as opposed to you as a brand figuring out what is your distinct sort of POV and sense of humor or perspective, whatever it is. What's the thing that you can sort of create and put into the world that gets people psyched to see oh my God, this brand again, they're so funny, they get it. I think when you rely on moments to come to you, you're not able to control and, own your destiny. You're reliant on external inputs, which again, maybe if you're the kind of brand that needs to be incredibly culturally relevant and tapped in, if you're a meme-based account, that might make sense. But I think for a lot of brands, the bigger value is sort of building a world that it's your world. It's not you're not waiting for anybody else to sort of tell you hey, go do this. So I think that's one of the most important things. And yeah.
I'm thinking about the trend of that just happened, not probably a month ago, millennial PR team versus Gen Z, some brands hopped on it, some brands didn't hop on it. So if you probably didn't have a millennial audience or a Gen Z audience, or if you didn't want to turn off millennials too much by saying the wrong thing, or if you're not funny enough to hop on that trend, you probably shouldn't have hopped on that trend. But you saw tons of brands from every walk of consumer hop on that trend. My feed for a day was that trend.
I actually think so. One of the interesting things that, I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn and I read all of the hot takes from all of the marketing pundits who are on there. And I think a year ago, it was pretty valid to say, it doesn't matter. My audience thinks this is funny, and my community gets it. But the way that algorithms work right now, it's exactly what you just said. Instagram will beat, if they see you are interested in something, they will beat it until you are get that out of my feed. I am done. I don't care about that trend anymore. So you really yeah, your audience might see that post from you and they'll be oh, haha. They're about to see 5 or 10 other iterations of that same take from 10 other brands. And so you really just start to blend into the moment as opposed to like stick out as a brand. So I just think that's another thing to think about as well, is just, you're going to be in a sea of sameness. I do think there are great examples though of brands who find a way to flip it and flip the format on its head. Or even, sort of the way that comedy can work. Comedy, it's like about surprise. There's like an element of surprise usually. So if you can, people are expecting that Gen Z versus millennial marketing format to deliver a certain, LOL moment. But if you can find a way to break the, sort of like break what they're expecting and surprise them with something else, then that could be an interesting place to play. But yeah, I think you just have to consider the way that the algorithm works right now is just very aggressive. And yeah,
it's very good. Both Instagram and TikTok is you just, and not even maybe interact, you just like stop for a second, and then that stop for a second's like, hey, that person stopped for a second, let me show you more of that content. I know we've touched on it probably for 3 seconds, but I want to go into how to use AI in this new social media world. Like, some people are like solely like heavy content slop side of it, and then some people are using it to heavy edit the content that they use, and then some people are using it process wise. So how do you think it should be used from a social media lens?
I think that it's something that you have to sort of, again, I think set guardrails for, and I think be very clear with your team or the company that you're working with when and how and why you're using AI in your processes. And I think the smartest way to use it is to fill a gap that you might have. And I think the two biggest gaps, maybe, I think social listening maybe to some extent, but I do think a lot of social teams are so deeply online and sort of aware of their audience, and they're sort of like in it, that you can sort of pick up on things without needing to dedicate hours of specific time to social listening. But I do think, like I mentioned earlier, social listening, when you're doing sort of like research to validate bigger bets. But the other one is data and data analysis, because I really think the biggest gap for social teams is an analytics expert, and having somebody who can actually parse through the data, identify patterns and things that you should sort of double click into and decide like, we're seeing 20% higher engagement on our videos that are 20 to 40 seconds long compared to our longer videos. So like, let's actually stop doing that and invest more of our time in that like mid-length video. These things that, you wouldn't necessarily see just when you're sort of assessing performance. That's where I think it can be the most valuable. And the other one, I think, too, is translating the things that you're seeing. So whether it is, data and analyzing data, or there are trends happening, when you have to present those to an executive or somebody outside of social or marketing, a lot of times they're so far from it that it'll be really hard for them to understand exactly why something matters or why it's something that the brand should invest in. So I think using AI to sort of like translate what you're seeing so that it makes sense to somebody else who has no context of like all the things that are happening on social and how the algorithms work and all that. I think that's an interesting place, is like, I just really believe the creative side of things, keep it as human as possible, because we're already seeing how much pushback there is against any form of AI content. So I think like keep your creative human, use AI for data, for sort of like, translating things in a way that might make sense for executive audiences, and for sort of like dealing with the mountains of information that we have at our disposal, use it to sort of make it make sense for you, sort of boil all of that down into interesting insights that you can decide whether or not you want to use.
Yes, I think it's right that a lot of people, especially in social, don't think about the data side. And now platforms are giving you so much good data, especially like IG, where you can like analyze like, how did you do your first 3 seconds? Like how many unfollowers versus followers are seeing your posts? Like when's the biggest drop off? Like, am I good at hooking, rehooking? Like, am I good at keeping people along? Is the CTA doing something? Like, I think, but it's hard to just look at that by video and see a pattern. You need to be able to have some sort of like pattern recognition, and like inherently, like not everybody's good at data analysis, and that's what AI is good at. So if you're not good at that, like you just ask like, hey, how do you think my hooks are doing? Like based on this data, is like, how do you think our hooks are doing? How, like, what's some ways I can get people to go longer? Do you think I'm the storytelling aspect? Like you could ask the questions and strategize with it based on the data. You don't have to use it to conceptualize, but you could say, maybe your hooks aren't good. Maybe your rehooks aren't good. Maybe you're not keeping people longer. Maybe the reason you should do only 40 seconds is because you're not good at storytelling for longer than 40 seconds. Like it's like there's patterns you see. So I really think that needs to be a tool to teach people how to do social listening. I mean, social data analysis. For people getting into social right now, what are some skills you think they should start building up to be good and get to that level of like, because I believe like social is going to be like a role that's going to keep being more and more like needed and more wanted and more valued as the years go by, because you said it before, it's like one, it's the closest thing to customers, and two, you get validation within like 2 hours versus like 3 weeks. So what do you recommend like the next generation if they want to get into social, what should they be learning right now?
I really think one of the most important things you can do is make content. And I think this is like an unpopular opinion. Again, sort of like in the LinkedIn universe, is there's sort of this like raging debate of like, to be an effective social media manager, do you need to have a personal brand? Do you need to be a content creator? Do you need to, have the demonstrated ability to grow an account? And I don't necessarily think you need to have 1 million followers, but I will say the thing that has made me the strongest and most effective social marketer and just marketer in general is the ability to understand how attention is won online, because this is the frontier and it's like the homepage of marketing is on social. So I think if you work as a content creator, to understand those things and to create content yourself, it allows you the safety net of being able to do that. If you're just operating in a brand world, you don't get to call the shots. You don't get to take creative risks. So I just think like that is a really important step for people to take, is figuring out, how all those things work in a safe space, and your own socials are a safe space to do that. So I think content creation for sure. And then the other one is just, sort of being a student of great brands. And one of the biggest conversations right now in marketing is sort of this, conversation around taste, and taste being the most important thing in this AI world where, there's just like mountains and mountains of slop, and every brand is, trying to figure out where and how do they use AI, or how do they, evolve in these times or whatever. But I think curating a roster of brands that you really appreciate and admire, and sort of studying and figuring out, why do I love that brand? And, are there things that I could learn or take from them? That's really important, because I think there's so much incredible inspiration out there, but it's not enough to sort of just swipe and sort of ingest things in your feed. I think you really need to sort of like study and obsess over it a little bit to understand why you love it, and help, allow that to sort of build your POV.
Yeah, I like that, because my wife, like, she builds taste by, like, it's not only like she follows like the brands, but she like very in tune of like what influencers consistently recommend like the same type of brands, and why they recommend the same type of brands, and who being in tune with influencers and brands are like a really good way, because you could see like why like that influencer, and why does everybody wearing like the row versus this brand or that brand. So I think like taste is like made over time by like and it's also made by trying. Like taste doesn't just come, and it's like you're going to try a lot and see to develop taste. It's not the inherent skill that you're just born with. So I think that is, the taste argument is hard because it requires actual being chronically online, or not chronically online, but like understanding brands. I want to ask you too, I like to ask everybody on this podcast, what's a marketing hill you would die on?
Okay, marketing hill I would die on is social is not a one-person job. And if you can only have one person on your social team, you need to have a really honest conversation about what it is you're going to have them focus on, because it is impossible for one person to do content creation, content planning, data analysis, social listening, paid social. Like there are so many areas within social at this point that, like I mentioned before, social is marketing in a sense. And so if you're only going to have one person or even 2 or 3 people, you just need to be really clear about what the objectives are and continue to sort of check in with them and make sure that whatever it is you're expecting from them is actually physically possible.
Let me ask you this question and to follow up. Like, I don't think most people know what goes on in social. And if it's saying that, like, say the founder says, I'm looking for a great social person. Like, how does that conversation honestly go back to them and say, like, as a social person, how do you push back and say, what do you want me to focus on?
Yeah, I think the most important thing you can do is sort of lay out the universe of social and be like, when you think of great social, are you thinking of great video content? Are you thinking of really strong, distinct educational carousels? Are you thinking of high entertainment value mini films? You sort of need to understand what they perceive to be great social. And then you can explain what it actually takes to deliver that. And I think it's easy for somebody to say, I want great social because I want, 1 million impressions a month. Maybe they're a very data-driven leader. And so it's like, okay, well, in order to do that, we're either going to have to go mega viral once or have a really strong, always on content engine. And in order to do that, we need, a content strategist, a producer or content creator, and maybe a marketing execution manager or somebody who can manage the processes of it all. So I think it's being really clear on what their vision is for successful social, and then explaining and sort of maybe bringing them down to earth a little bit on what it takes to get there.
Yeah, I think the Slate team had a good instant where I think we've kind of screwed up the title social media manager. I think we just need to get rid of that title, because I think when people say social media manager, they think 1,000 different things, and that you should just reorganize. Like, are they a social content producer? Are they the head of social content? Are they the strategy? What part of social are they? Are they not just a social media manager? Because when you hear social media manager, you think of maybe some people think of it as an intern, some people think of a low level job, some people think of it as this, and some people are looking for that head of social content, and some people are looking for someone to just keep always on content. And it's what are you looking for? So I think getting rid of that title would be a great idea in the future. Lastly, where can people find you and what you're doing?
You can find me on Instagram and TikTok at Director of Social. And so that's where I talk all things marketing, content, all the best and smartest brand plays, and on LinkedIn as well, which is a soft spot in my heart for LinkedIn, because that's where I first started making my own content. And I actually, going back to your question of what, if somebody's just starting out, spend time on LinkedIn and follow and be a student of great marketers, because I think there is so much information and behind the scenes that people share there that you would never find on Instagram or TikTok. And it allows you to sort of build who are your marketing heroes and who are the brands who, maybe it's also who are the brands who are lifting up their employees and the people who are doing great work for them, figuring out which companies have a culture that you might want to be a part of. So I just think LinkedIn is so valuable for so many reasons. And so, yeah, you can definitely find me there.
I will plus one for LinkedIn. I started 6 years ago, and it's the channel that helped me grow. So I have a soft spot for them too. But I think, there's different niches on the internet, like in LinkedIn. And if you're trying to dominate social, there's a couple great social people there. If you're trying to do something for paid social, there's paid social people. There's people who are good at strategy. There's people who are good at whatever. So there's people just. Hey, I always said when I first started social, before we get started, just go find, if you're going to create social media content, go find the top 10 social creators out there and reverse engineer what they do. Like we just said, for what you should do for brands, you should do that the same for personal brands too. Is go reverse engineer what the best they're doing, because they're doing something right and they have followers for a reason. So yeah, thank you so much. This has been a great talk.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Super fun.
Thanks so much for listening. Keep tuning in to hear more great insights from the coolest marketers from around the world. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and follow the Marketing Millennials podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, I would greatly appreciate you giving us a 5-star rating. It helps bring more marketers into our community.